He ended our 5-year relationship and said, "Your sister deserves the future we planned," while holding the engagement ring I had seen hidden in his drawer 3 weeks ago. Jason stood in the living room of what was supposed to be our apartment, the 1-carat diamond catching the afternoon light as Lauren emerged from the bedroom wearing my favorite robe, her hand resting protectively on her barely visible belly. The silence that followed was so complete I could hear the ice melting in the champagne bucket they'd set out on the counter, 2 glasses already poured, celebrating what they'd stolen from me. Lauren's smile was the worst part. Not apologetic, not guilty, just radiantly smug as she crossed the room to stand beside Jason, fitting herself under his arm like she'd practiced the movement. My mother appeared from the kitchen then, carrying a tray of appetizers, and the casual domesticity of it made my vision blur at the edges. She'd helped them stage this. My own mother had coordinated my public humiliation like it was a business merger. When I finally moved, it wasn't to scream or cry like they clearly expected. I walked to the champagne bucket, lifted both glasses, and poured them slowly into the succulent planter by the window. Then I turned back to face the 3 of them with a smile that made Lauren's falter slightly. I'm Rebecca Morrison, and I'd spent 5 years building a life with a man I thought I knew, helping him study for his real estate license, co-signing his first car lease, introducing him to the clients that became his biggest commission checks. 3 weeks ago, when I'd found that ring box hidden in his sock drawer, I'd cried happy tears in the bathroom, thinking he was finally ready for the commitment he'd been putting off. But then I'd noticed the receipt tucked inside. Dated for the same week Lauren had suddenly started stopping by our apartment when I was at work. The same week she'd asked me oddly specific questions about Jason's schedule. That's when I'd started paying attention to the details nobody thought I'd notice. And what I'd uncovered in those 3 weeks of silent investigation would destroy all 3 of them more completely than they could possibly imagine. The apartment they stood in so comfortably wasn't just any rental. My father's construction company owned the building, which meant I had access to every lease agreement, every inspection report, every piece of documentation that made this cozy love nest possible. The champagne they'd been drinking before I arrived wasn't just celebratory, it was premature. And that ring Jason held so possessively? I knew exactly what he'd traded to afford it, because I'd spent the last 3 weeks becoming intimately familiar with every transaction in his business accounts, every client he'd secretly poached from his brokerage, every corner he'd cut to appear more successful than he actually was. "I suppose congratulations are in order," I said, my voice steady enough to make Jason's shoulders relax slightly. He'd expected tears, accusations, the kind of dramatic scene Lauren had probably coached him to anticipate. Instead, I pulled my phone from my purse and took a single photo of the 3 of them standing together, Lauren's hand on her stomach, Jason's arm around her shoulders, my mother beaming beside them like a proud producer surveying her work. "What are you doing?" Lauren's voice had an edge of uncertainty now. "Making memories," I replied simply, already texting the image to myself, to the cloud, to 3 separate email accounts. After all, this is such a special moment for our family. I wouldn't want anyone to forget how it started. I walked to the door, my heels clicking against the hardwood floors my father's crew had installed just last month. Behind me, I could hear them starting to relax again, probably already spinning narratives about my graceful acceptance of the situation, my mature understanding that these things just happen sometimes. They had no idea that my grace was just patience, that my understanding was actually detailed knowledge of exactly how to dismantle their carefully constructed fantasy piece by methodical piece. "Oh, and Jason?" I paused in the doorway without turning around. "You might want to double-check the contingencies in your broker's license agreement. I heard the state board has gotten really strict lately about conflicts of interest and undisclosed relationships with clients' family members." The sound of his sharp intake of breath followed me all the way to the elevator. Sunday lunch at my parents' house had been a family tradition for 18 years, ever since Lauren turned 5 and declared she loved having all her favorite people together. I arrived exactly on time, walking through the front door without knocking like I'd done every weekend of my adult life. The dining room table was set for 5, which meant my father didn't know yet. That was interesting. My mother's face went pale when she saw me. Lauren actually dropped the salad tongs she'd been holding, ranch dressing splattering across the hardwood. Jason, to his credit, stood up from his seat at the table, though whether to flee or fight I couldn't tell. "Rebecca, I didn't think you'd come," my mother said, her voice carefully modulated in that way she used when trying to control situations that were slipping away from her. "Why wouldn't I come to family lunch?" I set my purse on the sideboard right next to the framed photo of Lauren's college graduation, the one where she was wearing the pearl earrings I'd given her. We have so much to celebrate. My father came in from the kitchen carrying a roast, his reading glasses perched on his head. Becky, I was hoping you'd make it. Your mother said you might be busy with work. He set the platter down, kissed my cheek, completely oblivious to the tension crackling through the room like static electricity. Actually, Dad, I took the whole week off, wanted to focus on some personal projects. I smiled at him, then at Jason, who'd gone slightly gray. Jason, you're looking well. How's business? Fine, he managed. Really good, actually. That's wonderful. Still working with the Hendersons on that commercial property downtown? I watched his Adam's apple bob as he swallowed hard. The Hendersons were my father's biggest clients, the ones I'd personally introduced to Jason 2 years ago. They were also the ones whose confidential financial information Jason had used to poach 3 other deals from his own brokerage. Lauren found her voice then, that little girl tone she used when she wanted sympathy. Becca, I know this is hard, but we didn't mean for it to happen this way. It just did. Things just happen, I agreed, taking my usual seat, like how babies just happen, or how apartments just become available right when you need them. I looked at my mother, whose hand had frozen halfway to her water glass. Mom, you've always been so good at making things happen for Lauren. Remember when you convinced Professor Davies to give her a makeup exam after she missed the final because of that concert? Or when you got her that internship at the law firm even though she didn't meet the GPA requirement? That's not fair, Lauren said, her voice rising. You've always been jealous that things come easier for me. Easier, I repeated, letting the word hang there. Is that what we're calling it? My father was looking between us now, confusion settling into something harder. What's going on here? Somebody want to tell me what I'm missing? My mother spoke quickly, her words tumbling over each other. David, we were going to talk to you tonight. Lauren and Jason have some news, and while the timing isn't ideal, we need to support them as a family. Lauren is pregnant. The silence that followed was broken only by the sound of my father's knife clattering against his plate. He looked at Jason, then at Lauren, then finally at me. Pregnant. 2 months, I supplied helpfully, which is interesting, because 2 months ago, Jason and I were still together. In fact, 2 months ago, I was helping him close that deal with the Patterson estate, the one that netted him a $90,000 commission. I turned to Jason. You remember that weekend, don't you? You said you had to work late on Saturday to finalize paperwork. What address was that property at again? Jason's chair scraped against the floor as he pushed back from the table. I don't have to sit here and be interrogated. You're right, I said calmly. You should probably be having this conversation with your broker instead. Or maybe with the state licensing board. I'm sure they'd be fascinated to hear how you've been structuring your deals. Rebecca, that's enough. My mother's voice had taken on the sharp edge she used when Lauren's feelings were hurt. Lauren has always been more delicate. She needs stability. This baby needs a father and a home, and you're being selfish by making this about your wounded pride. The words landed exactly as she'd intended, the familiar script of my childhood playing out one final time. Lauren the fragile one. Lauren the one who needed protecting. Lauren whose happiness somehow always required my sacrifice. I stood up slowly, deliberately, and pulled a manila folder from my purse. You're absolutely right, Mom. Family comes first. I opened the folder, spreading documents across the table like tarot cards revealing an ugly future. Which is why I spent the last 3 weeks making sure I understood exactly what kind of family I was dealing with. The documents covered the dining table in a neat grid, each one a small bomb waiting to detonate. My father picked up the nearest one, his eyes scanning the text before widening. It was a lease agreement for the apartment, the one my mother had helped furnish, the one that was supposed to be my future. Only this version had annotations I'd added, highlighting specific clauses. This is for Unit 304, my father said slowly, the 2-bedroom corner unit in the Morrison building. Your building, I confirmed, the one you own. The one where Mom personally selected furniture and helped set up utilities for Lauren and Jason. Did you authorize that, Dad? Or did Mom just use your company credit card without mentioning what the expenses were for? My mother's face flushed. I was helping my daughter. You were committing fraud, I corrected. Company resources used for personal benefit without the owner's knowledge or consent. That's embezzlement, Mom. Small scale, maybe, but documented in detail across 4 months of credit card statements. Lauren was shaking her head, her hands pressed flat against the table. This is insane. You're making this into something it's not because you can't handle that Jason chose me. Jason didn't choose you, I said, picking up another document. Jason chose your naivety. See, While you thought he was falling in love with you during those convenient afternoon visits to our apartment, he was actually using access to your laptop to steal client information from Mom's real estate files, the ones she brings home from work. I slid the paper toward Lauren. These are screenshots of login attempts to her company portal, all made from Jason's phone, all time-stamped during periods when he was supposedly keeping you company while I worked late. Jason had gone completely white. You have no proof that was me. I have timestamps matching text messages you sent Lauren from our apartment. I have the metadata from files downloaded during those sessions, and I have sworn statements from 2 cybersecurity analysts who traced the breach back to your device. I pulled out a thumb drive, held it up so everyone could see. Everything's on here. 600 pages of documentation, cross-referenced and verified. My father stood up abruptly, his chair tipping backward. You used my daughter to steal from your employer? His voice was dangerously quiet. Our employer, Jason corrected desperately. I brought in the Henderson account, the Patterson estate, 3 commercial properties last quarter alone. Your company benefits from my success. My company benefits from client relationships built on trust, my father said. Relationships you exploited and corrupted. How many of those deals were closed using information you weren't supposed to have? The next document I laid down showed exactly that. A spreadsheet I'd compiled tracking Jason's closed deals against suspicious activity in client files, against private conversations he shouldn't have been privy to, against confidential financial information that somehow always seemed to reach him at exactly the right moment. 12 deals, I said. 12 times he used information he stole to undercut other agents, to time his offers perfectly, to know exactly what numbers to pitch. That's over $400,000 in commissions obtained through fraud. My mother grabbed the spreadsheet, her eyes scanning desperately for an escape route. You can't prove intent. Jason could have legitimately learned this information through proper channels. Could have, I agreed. Except I also have recordings. I pulled out my phone, queued up the first audio file. My voice filled the room, tinny through the speaker, asking Jason about his unusually accurate predictions on the Henderson property. His response was damning in its casual arrogance, explaining how he'd done his homework by accessing files Lauren had open on her computer. You recorded him? Lauren's voice was shrill now, panic bleeding through. That's illegal. New York is a one-party consent state, I replied, which means I only needed my own permission to record our private conversations. And I have dozens of them, spanning 6 months, showing a clear pattern of deliberate information theft and client manipulation. Jason moved toward the door, but my father blocked his path, not physically threatening, just standing there with the quiet authority of a man who'd built a business from nothing and understood exactly what he was looking at. Sit down, my father said. It wasn't a request. Jason sat. I continued laying out documents. Bank statements showing deposits that didn't match Jason's claimed income. Client complaints that had been mysteriously resolved before reaching official channels. Emails between Jason and a competing brokerage discussing the possibility of bringing high-value clients with him if he switched firms. Clients he'd only gained access to through my family. You were planning to leave Morrison Properties, my father said, his voice flat. After using us to build your book of business, you were going to take everything to Blackstone Realty. That's just business, Jason tried. Agents change firms all the time. Not with client lists they obtained through fraud, I said, and definitely not with non-compete agreements they signed upon hiring. I pulled out Jason's employment contract, the one he'd barely glanced at when my father had offered him a position 3 years ago. The non-compete clause was highlighted in yellow, the penalties for violation outlined in crisp legal language. Lauren was crying now, mascara tracking down her cheeks, but I felt nothing. No satisfaction, no pity, just the cool certainty that I was doing exactly what needed to be done. There's more, I said, because there was always more when you actually bothered to look. The apartment you're living in isn't just company property. It's part of a tax-advantaged affordable housing development. To qualify for the reduced rent, tenants have to meet specific income requirements. Requirements that Jason's reported income exceeds by 40%. My mother's sharp intake of breath told me she hadn't known that detail. Housing fraud, I continued, on top of everything else. That's federal. You vindictive bitch, Jason spat, abandoning any pretense of civility. You're destroying us because I fell in love with someone else. This is just revenge. This is consequences, I corrected. You stole from my family, defrauded clients, committed housing fraud, and convinced my sister to participate in your schemes. I didn't create this situation. I just documented it. I pulled out the final document, the one I'd saved for last. It was a letter from the State Real Estate Board, dated for delivery tomorrow morning, formally notifying Jason of an investigation into his licensing status based on anonymous complaints supported by substantial evidence. Your broker's license will be suspended pending investigation, I said, which means no income, no commissions, no ability to close any of the deals you have in progress. The board investigation typically takes 6 months. Given what they're going to find, permanent revocation is almost certain. Lauren lurched to her feet, her hand on her stomach. He needs his job. We have a baby coming. How are we supposed to live? That's not my problem, I said simply. You made your choices. Both of you. My mother finally found her voice shaking with fury. You would do this to your own sister? Leave her destitute with a child? I'm not leaving her destitute, I replied. You are. You chose to help them steal from Dad, to use company resources for their benefit, to cover up their affair while I was working 60-hour weeks to support Jason's career development. Every choice that led to this moment was made by people in this room, just not by me. I gathered my documents back into their folder, leaving only one sheet behind. It was an invoice for the furniture my mother had purchased for the apartment, itemized and dated, with a payment demand at the bottom. The company will expect reimbursement within 30 days, I said. That's just good business. The Morrison building superintendent received his instructions on Monday morning at 8. Jason and Lauren had until Friday to vacate Unit 304, with any personal property remaining after that deadline to be disposed of according to standard breach of lease protocols. The letter was delivered by courier, formal and legally airtight, citing multiple violations of the rental agreement, including misrepresentation of income and unauthorized use of the premises for business purposes. Jason called me 16 times that day. I answered none of them. By Tuesday, the State Real Estate Board had formally opened their investigation. Jason's broker, Richard Carmichael, learned about the inquiry when 3 investigators appeared at his office requesting access to Jason's client files and commission records. Richard called my father within the hour. Did you know about this? Richard's voice was tight with barely controlled anger. My father had put him on speaker so I could listen from across his office. I know that one of your agents systematically defrauded multiple clients using stolen information, my father replied. I know that my company's reputation has been damaged, and I know that you're going to cooperate fully with the investigation if you want to avoid being implicated as negligent in your supervision. Richard's response was a string of creative profanity followed by the sound of a phone being slammed down. Wednesday brought a registered letter to my mother's firm, detailed allegations of data breach and negligent security practices that had allowed unauthorized access to client information. The letter came from Morrison Properties legal counsel, professionally worded but unmistakably threatening litigation unless immediate remediation steps were taken. My mother's boss called her into his office at 11. She was placed on administrative leave by noon. Lauren showed up at my new apartment that evening, the one I'd moved into over the weekend, the one whose address she'd gotten from our father. She was a mess, tears and rage combining into something almost feral. You're destroying us! She screamed through the door. Jason can't work. We can't pay rent. Mom is going to lose her job. And it's all because you couldn't handle being second choice for once in your life. I opened the door calmly, my phone in hand, recording. First choice, I corrected. I was always first choice until you decided to steal what was mine, and I didn't destroy anything. You did that yourselves by thinking you could betray family without consequences. We're pregnant! She practically shrieked the words. Doesn't that mean anything to you? It means you should have thought harder about who you were getting pregnant by, I replied. Jason's about to be unemployed, blacklisted, and likely facing criminal charges. What did you think was going to happen? I thought my sister would care that I'm going to be homeless. You thought your sister would roll over and let you steal her life, I corrected. You were wrong. Now you get to figure out how to build your own life instead of taking mine. I closed the door while she was still screaming, turned up the music to drown out her voice, and poured myself a glass of the expensive wine I'd been saving for a special occasion. This qualified. Thursday morning brought the email I'd been waiting for. The Henderson family, Jason's biggest clients, had been notified of the investigation and requested immediate reassignment to a different agent. They specifically asked for me. 2 hours later, the Patterson estate executor sent a similar request. By end of business, 5 of Jason's major clients had transferred their representation, all of them coming to me with messages expressing concern about the irregularities they'd been made aware of. My father approved each transfer personally, his signature on the paperwork feeling like vindication made official. Friday arrived with the sound of a moving truck outside the Morrison building. I drove by at 9 in the morning, watched Jason and Lauren loading their belongings into a U-Haul they clearly couldn't afford, supervised by the superintendent who was there to ensure they didn't damage anything on their way out. Lauren saw me, started to approach my car, but Jason grabbed her arm and pulled her back. Smart man. The restraining order I'd filed on Wednesday wouldn't be officially served until Monday, but he must have sensed how close to the edge they were. My phone rang as I pulled away. Unknown number. I answered. Miss Morrison? This is Detective Sarah Patel with the Fraud Investigation Unit. We'd like to speak with you about a complaint we received regarding real estate transactions conducted by Jason Whitmore. I have extensive documentation available, I said. When would you like to meet? The criminal complaint was filed 3 weeks after Jason and Lauren moved into Lauren's old studio apartment, the one she'd kept when she thought she was moving up in the world. The space was barely 400 square feet, with a window that looked directly into another building and plumbing that groaned ominously whenever anyone used water. I knew because I'd helped her move into that place 6 years ago, back when we were sisters who looked out for each other. The charges were extensive: wire fraud for the electronic transfer of stolen client information, identity theft for accessing accounts without authorization, forgery for documents he'd altered to support his fraudulent deals. The prosecutor had built a case that could result in 15 years of federal prison time. Lauren, in her desperate attempt to protect him, had made statements to police that contradicted earlier testimony. Now she was facing charges of obstruction and making false statements to investigators. The public defender assigned to her case had the exhausted look of someone trying to bail out a sinking ship with a teaspoon. My mother's administrative leave became permanent termination when the firm's internal investigation concluded she'd violated client confidentiality policies by bringing sensitive files home and storing them on unsecured devices. Her 23-year career ended with a security escort out of the building and a notation in her personnel file that made her unhireable in the industry. She tried calling me once, her voice small and broken on my voicemail. I know you're angry, but this has gone too far. Your sister is pregnant and scared. Jason is talking about taking a plea deal that could send him to prison. I've lost my career. When does it stop, Rebecca? I deleted the message without responding. It stopped when they learned that actions have consequences, and not a moment before. The baby arrived in early December, 3 weeks premature. A girl. Lauren sent me a photo through a mutual friend, probably hoping maternal instinct would trigger some kind of reconciliation. The baby had Jason's dark hair and Lauren's nose. She looked like a stranger's child because that's what she was. Jason took the plea deal in January. 5 years in federal prison, 3 years supervised probation, and permanent prohibition from any occupation requiring fiduciary trust. He'd be 41 when he got out, with no career, no prospects, and a daughter he'd barely known. The morning they led him away in handcuffs, Lauren posted something on social media about families being torn apart by bitterness and revenge. She tagged me in it. I responded with a single comment: families are torn apart by betrayal and theft. I just made sure there was accountability. Then I blocked her. My mother showed up at my father's office in February, desperate and diminished. She wanted money, help, anything to keep Lauren and the baby from complete destitution. My father listened in silence, then slid an envelope across his desk. Inside was a check for $15,000 and an eviction notice for my parents' house. That house is in my name, he said quietly. You used my resources to help them steal from me. Consider this your severance package. You have 60 days. She left without the check. The final piece fell into place in March when the State Real Estate Board officially revoked Jason's license. The decision was published in their quarterly bulletin, available for anyone in the industry to read. His name became a cautionary tale, the example used in ethics courses about what happens when you prioritize profit over integrity. I framed a copy of the bulletin and hung it in my new office, the corner unit at Morrison Properties that came with my promotion to senior vice president. The view looked out over the city, glass and steel reflecting the spring sunshine, everything clean and bright and mine. 2 years later, I'm sitting in the back of a town car on my way to close the biggest deal of my career. A $50 million commercial development that will cement Morrison Properties as the premier firm in the state. My father is retiring next year, and I'm taking over as CEO. The industry magazines are calling me one of the most promising young executives in real estate. I heard Lauren is working checkout at a grocery store, living in subsidized housing with a daughter she can barely afford to raise. Jason is in year 3 of his sentence, with no job prospects waiting when he gets out. My mother rents a 1-bedroom apartment in a different city, estranged from everyone, her career destroyed, and her golden child dependent on government assistance. Sometimes people ask if I regret what I did, if I think maybe I went too far. They use words like forgiveness, healing, letting go. They suggest therapy like I'm the one who needs fixing. I never regret it, not for a single second. They stole from me. They betrayed me. They conspired to humiliate me and expected me to accept it, because that's what I'd always done. Put Lauren first, sacrifice for the family, be the responsible one who cleaned up everyone else's mistakes. Instead, I made sure their theft came with a price so steep they'd never recover from paying it. I ensured that every person who'd enabled them faced consequences proportional to their complicity. And I built something better from the ruins of what they tried to take. The car pulls up to the development site. Through the window, I can see the investors waiting, the architects, the contractors, all of them here because I delivered results. Because I'm known for integrity and thoroughness. Because when I make a promise, it means something. Lauren posted another photo of her daughter last week. She's 3 now, gap-toothed smile, and my sister's eyes. The caption was something about single mothers being warriors, about surviving against all odds. She survived because I chose to let her. Jason's in prison because I chose to pursue every available legal remedy. My mother's career ended because I refused to protect her from the consequences of her choices. They didn't just betray me. They underestimated me. And that was their biggest mistake. I step out of the car, straighten my jacket, and walk toward the future I built without them. Behind me, somewhere in this city, 3 people are living with the permanent consequences of thinking family loyalty meant I'd tolerate theft and betrayal. They learned differently. And I've never slept better. The Forbes profile photographer adjusts my position slightly, asking me to angle toward the window where afternoon light spills across the mahogany desk. Under 35 and revolutionizing real estate is the headline they're running. The article will detail how I transformed Morrison Properties from a regional firm into a national powerhouse with offices in 12 states and annual revenue exceeding $200 million. My father officially retired 18 months ago, handing me the CEO position in a ceremony attended by 300 industry professionals. He cried during his speech, talking about legacy and integrity and the daughter who'd exceeded every expectation. What he didn't mention, what nobody mentions anymore, is the family that used to exist before the implosion. Can you tell me about your management philosophy? The interviewer asks, her recorder between us on the desk. Accountability, I say without hesitation. I believe in surrounding myself with people who understand that trust is earned through consistent ethical behavior and that betrayal has permanent consequences. She scribbles notes, probably thinking it's just corporate speak. She has no idea I'm describing a worldview forged in the fires of the most comprehensive revenge campaign our industry has ever witnessed. My phone buzzes with a text from Marcus Chen, my COO and the man I've been dating for 2 years. He's everything Jason wasn't. Successful in his own right, transparent about his finances, and absolutely terrified of disappointing me. Our relationship works because he understands boundaries and respects the fact that I will never, ever be the accommodating woman who puts someone else's needs before her own survival. The text reads, "Guess who just applied for a job in our mailroom?" I don't have to guess. There's only one person desperate enough and stupid enough to think I wouldn't find out. After the interview wraps up and the photographer packs away her equipment, I pull up the employment application on my computer. Jason Whitmore, age 39, applying for an entry-level mailroom position at $12 an hour. The application is pathetic in its sparse details. Education, high school diploma, previous employment, 5-year gap explained as personal circumstances, references, a parole officer, and a community reintegration counselor. He's been out of prison for 6 months, living in a halfway house, working overnight shifts at a warehouse until he was fired for attendance issues. His parole officer probably encouraged him to apply to legitimate companies, to rebuild his life through honest work. The parole officer has no idea who owns Morrison Properties. I forward the application to HR with a single word: denied. Then I add, flag his name in our system. Any future applications from Jason Whitmore are to be automatically rejected and reported to me immediately. It's not enough that he served his time. It's not enough that his life is destroyed. He needs to understand that there are doors that will remain permanently closed. Futures that were incinerated the moment he decided my sister was worth more than his integrity. My assistant Jordan knocks before entering. Your 4 o'clock is here. I'd almost forgotten. The lawyer handling my mother's bankruptcy filing had requested a meeting, probably hoping I'd be willing to contribute something to prevent complete financial collapse. I'd agreed to the meeting purely out of curiosity about how far she'd fallen. The lawyer is young, probably fresh out of law school, with an earnestness that suggests he still believes people are fundamentally good. He sits across from my desk, briefcase on his lap, looking nervous. "Thank you for meeting with me, Miss Morrison. I'm representing Catherine Morrison in her Chapter 7 bankruptcy proceedings." "I'm aware," I say. "What does this have to do with me?" He shifts uncomfortably. "Your mother has substantial medical debt from a cardiac episode last year. Between that and her inability to secure employment in her field, she's facing complete insolvency. I understand there's been family estrangement, but I was hoping you might be willing to provide some financial assistance." "No," I say simply. "Miss Morrison, she's your mother. Surely there's some compassion. My mother embezzled company funds, committed fraud, and actively participated in a conspiracy to steal from this firm and from me personally." I interrupt. "The fact that she's facing consequences for those choices doesn't create an obligation on my part to rescue her from them. She's 61 years old with serious health problems and no support system." "That's unfortunate," I agree. "Perhaps she should have considered those factors before she decided to prioritize my sister's affair over basic ethics and family loyalty." The lawyer tries several more approaches, each one a variation on the theme of Christian charity and familial duty. I let him exhaust his arguments before standing, signaling the meeting's end. "My mother made her choices with full awareness of potential consequences," I say. "She's an intelligent woman who decided that short-term convenience was worth more than long-term integrity. Now she's learning what that decision costs. I won't interfere with that education." After he leaves, Jordan brings me coffee and the afternoon mail. Buried in the stack of contracts and correspondence is a letter with childish handwriting on the envelope. No return address. But I recognize Lauren's distinctive looping letters. I should throw it away unopened. Instead, I slice the envelope carefully and extract 3 pages of notebook paper covered in my sister's desperate scrawl. "Rebecca, I don't know if you'll read this, but I have to try. Mia is 5 now. She asks about you sometimes because she sees pictures of you in magazines and online. She doesn't understand why her aunt is famous but doesn't know she exists. Jason got out 6 months ago, but his parole officer says he's not allowed to contact you or Dad. He's trying to find work, but nobody will hire him with his record. We're barely surviving. I work 2 jobs, but it's not enough. The apartment we're in has mold and the landlord won't fix it. Mia has asthma now. I know you're angry. I know what we did was wrong, but it's been 5 years. Haven't we been punished enough? Mia is innocent in all this. She deserves to know her family, to have opportunities, to not live in poverty because of mistakes her parents made before she was born. Mom had a heart attack last year. She almost died. She has no money for medications and her insurance lapsed. Dad won't return her calls. You're the only one who has resources to help. I'm begging you, not for me, but for Mia and Mom. Please, we're family." Lauren, I read the letter twice, looking for any acknowledgement of actual wrongdoing beyond the vague admission that what we did was wrong. There's no apology for the betrayal, no recognition of the theft and fraud, just a litany of consequences framed as unfair punishment. The part about Mia is calculated manipulation. Lauren knows I'm not heartless enough to ignore a child's suffering. What she doesn't understand is that I'm strategic enough to recognize manipulation, even when it's wrapped in maternal desperation. I take a photo of the letter, email it to my lawyer with instructions to document it as attempted contact in violation of the informal boundaries we'd established, and then feed the pages through my office shredder. The destruction is satisfying. Strips of my sister's desperation falling into the waste bin like confetti celebrating their continued irrelevance. That evening, Marcus and I have dinner at the restaurant where we had our first date. He's been hinting about something important he wants to discuss, and I'm 90% certain it involves a ring. Unlike Jason's deceptive planning, Marcus has been transparent about his intentions, asking my father's permission last month and making sure I knew he was serious about our future. When he does pull out the box, opening it to reveal a stunning emerald-cut diamond, I'm genuinely moved. Not because I need a man to complete me, but because Marcus represents everything I rebuilt after the destruction. He's success earned through actual work, partnership based on mutual respect, love that doesn't require my diminishment. "I'm not asking you to change," he says carefully. "I'm asking to be part of what you've built, to support what you're still building. And I promise I will never make you regret trusting me." I say yes because I want to, not because I need to. There's power in that distinction. The engagement announcement runs in the business section 2 days later. Marcus Chen, COO of Chen Development Group, and Rebecca Morrison, CEO of Morrison Properties, announcing their engagement. The article mentions our combined net worth exceeds $50 million and speculates about potential business synergies. My father calls that afternoon, joy evident in his voice. I'm so happy for you, Becky. Marcus is a good man. You deserve this happiness. What he doesn't say, what we both understand, is that I earned this happiness by refusing to accept betrayal as inevitable, by dismantling the people who tried to destroy me so thoroughly that they can never threaten me again. 3 weeks before the wedding, Lauren shows up at Morrison Properties' downtown office. Security calls me from the lobby, tells me there's a woman with a child claiming to be my sister. I watch on the security feed as Lauren bounces a small girl on her hip, the child thin and wearing clothes that have been washed too many times. Tell her I'm in meetings all day, I instruct security, and update her photo in our system. She's not permitted on the premises for any reason. I watch Lauren's face crumple when security delivers the message. She tries to argue, gets increasingly agitated, until finally security escorts her out. The little girl waves at the camera as they leave, innocent of the fact that her mother's choices have closed doors that will never reopen. That night, I receive an email from an address I don't recognize. The subject line reads, "You've become everything you hated." The message is from my mother. You've turned into a vindictive, heartless person who uses power to crush anyone who disappoints you. Your father and I raised you to value family, forgiveness, and compassion. Instead, you've built an empire on bitterness and revenge. Lauren is struggling to feed her child. Jason can't find work because you've blacklisted him throughout the industry. I'm facing homelessness because you won't lift a finger to help. And you're planning an extravagant wedding while your family suffers. I hope you're happy with what you've become. I hope the money and success are worth the cost of your humanity. Your mother, though you clearly don't consider me that anymore, I forward the email to my lawyer with instructions to document it as harassment. Then I compose a response I'll never send, typing out the words just to see them. You raised me to be responsible, to work hard, to build something meaningful. Then you taught me that family loyalty is a weapon used against the strong to benefit the weak. You showed me that being the good daughter meant accepting betrayal, that forgiveness was just another word for enabling. I became what you taught me to become. Someone who understands that consequences matter, that trust once broken stays broken, and that sometimes the most compassionate thing you can do is let people experience the full weight of their choices. You want forgiveness? Earn it by accepting responsibility, without qualification or excuse. Until then, your suffering is just the market rate for betrayal. I delete the draft unsent. She doesn't deserve my explanations. The wedding is everything Jason's would have been if he'd actually married me. 200 guests, 4-tier cake, reception at the city's most exclusive venue. My father walks me down the aisle with pride in his eyes. Marcus's vows include a promise to never take my trust for granted. When we're pronounced married, the applause is thunderous. Lauren doesn't show up, not that she was invited. My mother remains absent from the photos, a ghost of family structure that collapsed under the weight of its own corruption. During the reception, my father pulls me aside, champagne in hand. Your mother sent me a letter, he says quietly, asking me to talk to you about reconciliation. What did you tell her? I told her that I'm proud of the daughter who refused to accept betrayal as inevitable, he says, and that if she wanted a relationship with you, she should try actually apologizing instead of demanding sympathy. We toast to that, to boundaries maintained and consequences delivered, to the family we chose rather than the one that tried to destroy us. 5 years after Jason handed me that ring while my sister stood in my bathrobe, I'm standing in a ballroom full of people who respect me, married to a man who values me, running a company I built from the wreckage of betrayal. Lauren is working retail and fighting with housing authorities. Jason is unemployable and permanent parole supervision. My mother is bankrupt and estranged from everyone, and I have never slept better.